What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 1 of Sales Stories in Real Life 2.0. I'm your host, Alex Brusky. I've got Morgan J Ingram here, CEO of AMP, to get Sales Stories in Real Life 2.0 launched in a huge way. Morgan and everyone listening, one of the new things about the show is we are going to give you actionable takeaways within the first minute, within the first 30 seconds. So let's jump right into it, Morgan. What's some immediately implementable advice that our listeners can implement in order to take a more buyer-centric approach when they're selling?
Okay, so y'all, you're gonna absolutely love this because this is in real time advice that I did last week that helped me book a meeting. So this is not like theory, this is something I did. So I want you all to go look up, and every industry has this to a degree. Go look up all the subject matter experts or thought leaders or influencers, whatever you want to call them in your space, and look at what they're posting, and then go inside of the comments of those posts and reach out to the people in that post because they're in their ICP, and then use that in your LinkedIn message. So what I'll do is I saw someone they posted about internal influencers. Part of our services is helping people build that. So I saw someone posted that. So I literally went to someone in the comments and I messaged them directly and I said, hey, Sally, saw that you just liked the post about internal influencers. I think it's like the future where things are going. How are you currently leveraging that internally? And they told me, oh, well, we've actually been talking about internally, but we don't have a plan. And then I said, oh, well, we actually have like a whole process and plan on how to do this. And that led into a meeting. So that's like immediately actionable that anyone can take and go again. You got to go look at the post, comments, or likes, and then start engaging with those people.
Hot off the press, folks.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great advice. And one of the reasons I'm really excited to have you on is obviously at AMP, one of the things you guys are very much focused on is growing and empowering creators to grow their revenue systems. And I
Yep.
think one of the ways that you have constantly been a vocal advocate of this is by becoming a subject matter expert. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that a whole lot today.
Yep.
People listening may be familiar with it, but for those maybe who aren't, and maybe for those that misinterpret what a subject matter expert actually is, what would you define as a subject matter expert, and how does somebody become that?
Yeah. So this is a question that I got. I just did a virtual talk at Marketing Land, and someone asked the same exact thing. How do I become a subject matter expert? The best way to do that is to study the subject matter that you really care about and start sharing your thoughts on a platform to do that. I believe on focusing only one platform at a time. I don't suggest doing like five at a time. And I'm saying this because back in 2017, I started doing Instagram and LinkedIn at the same time. And I actually got rid of Instagram to only focus on LinkedIn to grow to what it is today. And I still would do that same decision again if you told me to, if I had to go back in time. So start sharing your thoughts on your subject matter expertise. Actually study the subject matter, and figure out what is your point of view that's going to be different than everybody else's. That's how you stay getting on the path of being a subject matter expert.
Great advice. That kind of leads me right into my next question, because I myself, if I would want to be a subject matter expert on anything, of course, would be, helping people to start their own podcasts. Hello. And number two, being buyer centric. Like that's one of the things that I really stand on, that like sellers who are
Absolutely.
buyer centric will succeed. So let's kind of go down that path a little bit. What does buyer centric actually even mean to you? How would you define it, Morgan?
Yeah, so being buyer centric is understanding what are the psychological and logical and emotional steps that a buyer is going through, and how do you map your selling behavior to that? So when you think about, most sellers have never been buyers. And I think you've had him on the pod before in season one, KD talks about this a lot. And I learned this from him as a mentor and a friend. He was like, you have to understand, what does a buyer go through? Because you as a seller maybe haven't been that buyer. And now that I'm a CEO, I see exactly the things that I did that makes me annoyed that sellers that I've done it as a seller. Because I'm like, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? And so you have to get an understanding of how they buy that process. So a tactical thing that I tell people to do is go and listen and even have conversations with your buyers to understand, how do they make those decisions? one of the best things that I did starting off AMP and the reason why we've been able to move so fast and also we've made certain pivots along the way or slight adjustments is because we just listen to the market. So you have to be in market to go to market. You have to understand the buyer to sell to the buyer. So the buyer centric approach is, do I understand what they care about? Do I understand like what do they consume, even watch? What are the media that they consume? Like all these things you need to understand to make sure along the process you are being that buyer centric approach first.
It's probably one of the best definitions I've ever heard for buyer-centric approach because I feel like people don't make the distinction between logically and emotionally. It's not just like, well, what is your buyer thinking? Like that's a really good start. But
Yep.
what are they thinking logically? What are they thinking emotionally? You said it really well too. Like, what media are they consuming, right? Like,
Yep.
are they seeing things that are about this or about that? So I think that's a really, really great distinction. How can folks say maybe kind of take that next step of like they know that they want to become more buyer centric?
Yeah.
They kind of look in the mirror and they're not as buyer centric as they want to be. Like, what are some kind of like action steps that folks could take to go down that path?
Yeah, so my old CRO that I used to work with, Tony Jackson, he came up with essentially this process that we were building. Basically, it's the buyer's cycle. So you have like on the seller's cycle, well, there's a buyer cycle. And so what we did is we mapped out what are all the things that a buyer needs to receive and how can we make it a better experience throughout the entire way. So the best way to think about that, I like to use them as an example, where however people feel about them, they still have done a good job. Disney. So Walt Disney, I've read a lot about his work in his documentary. He said from the beginning of the park to literally every inch of the park, he's mapped out what the user experience would be. He even did the craziest thing as well. I don't even know if you know this, but this is to me what was wild. He he would go to concession stands or go to restaurants, ice cream, etc. He would eat the ice cream, and then when he was done eating whatever it was, he says, "We need a trash can here." He was that granular up to a level to understand the user experience. And so, what am I saying? I'm saying that like for the beginning of the touch of you reaching out to acquire a client to like your outbound to all the way to your we're onboarding this person to renewal, you need to know what that customer experience is and understand how would the buyer respond to it. And these are all things right now we're working at AMP. We're actually redoing a lot of, I would say enhancing it. We're enhancing a lot of things we're doing right now because we're doing some things well, but I know there's some things we could do way better. So now we're figuring out how to enhance that process. And that's the same thing I think everyone else should do as well.
Dude, it's a perfect story too, especially like being there and eating the ice cream and disposing of it. Like
She's psycho, but
there's only one way to come to that conclusion, and it's
Mm,
like live those experiences. Like you can't really teach that or like
yeah.
survey that. So that's a perfectly timed story. And speaking of AMP, I know one of the things that you guys are really, really working hard on and candidly really pushing the
Mhm.
topic forward as subject matter experts is of course influencer marketing for folks who are following you already, folks who aren't should. So influencer marketing, obviously you have seen that evolve over the years, back all the way from the Chronicles of an SDR days, all the way up to
Crazy.
now,
Yeah.
taking life as AMP. How do you see influencer marketing become successful? I know a lot of people hear the word influencer marketing and maybe like a big external influencer making a post for you is the first thing that comes to mind. And that
Yeah.
may not necessarily be the case. How would you say that you see influencer marketing be successful? And what's kind of your latest and greatest findings in the field?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is you need to first define what success is. So I find that in some with some brands that we work with, their success is just like we just want people to know who we are. Okay, well, no, we can do that, right? Or some people are like, I want this distributed to X amount of pipeline. Or hey, I just want people to know that we even exist in this category in the United States.
Right.
So I realize that everyone is different, but this is what I will tell you. I'll give a real use case that I've shared quite a bit. It's on our website. This brand we continuously work with them. I'll share that here in a minute. But when you think of success, I want you to think about what are we doing this for before you even go into that. So, for example, most people do influencer marketing, and it could be for a fad, but I don't think that's the reason I'm doing it. Because what we've identified, and this is just based on my sales development background, is that like, well, we don't have enough pipeline and we don't have enough brand awareness overall in the market. So we know
Right.
if we create content to get brand awareness in the market, we solve the problem of pipeline because now our sellers actually can get to people because they know who we are.
Right.
Like transparently, probably you as well. It's easier for me. This is why I try to always use myself not as a use case sometimes. It's easier for me to personally get meetings now because people have seen my name before or if they've seen a video from me. So they're like, oh, I know Morgan is, I'm going to respond. Probably for you to a degree because you have done podcasting for a while, you put content out there, it's easier for you to get a meeting than the average rep,
Right.
right? The average rep for both of us. So come back to the point. You need to figure out what those metrics are. High level metrics are like pipeline attributed, pipeline velocity, increase in brand impressions, increase in followers, engagement signups. Everyone's models are different. Those are examples. But I'll give
Right.
you a core example we did with a brand. So Cognizant, I've been working with them for the past 2 years. We have a long-term brand partnership, which I believe a lot of influencer marketing, that's what's going to happen. It's not going to be a lot of one and done. And we decided our unique mechanism is to do episodic content or shows. And that's essentially what we sell to clients as well, because I know that leads to returns based on what I'm about to tell you. So in 2023, and we don't have the 2024 data yet because we're working on that right now. But in 2023, we had 2.6 million pipeline that came from these shows alone. I'm not anything else, just from the shows alone, and $583,000 closed from that. So I'm
Wow.
telling you that story that like we are seeing at work that we still obviously are working with them. So this is a continuation of what's working. And I believe you have to have a subject matter expert be a host, which I am, or a guest of a show. So you can show the credibility to your audience and become the education hub to people. But that's just one core example. We go into more, but that's just one thing.
That's something I know I'm gonna bring him up because you and I are both big fans. That's something Todd Clouser talks about a
Yeah.
lot as well, and that's one of the things that I have learned from both of you so well is just being that voice of authority. Like just I don't know how else to explain it, but like it makes gravity center around
Yeah.
you, right? It's like you
Sure.
are like the person for the topic. I think that's a great thread that you're going down, particularly when it comes to just the amount of pipeline and closed revenue influenced is like absurd. So you're in your bag right now, and I want you to keep going. That's obviously a huge change that's happened in B2B
Yeah.
buying and selling in just the past couple of years, maybe 3 years, depending on who you ask.
Right.
What other changes do you see kind of coming to the B2B buying and selling landscape that maybe people aren't talking about enough yet?
Yeah. This is a good call out. I think these are my hypotheses, by the way. These are not what I need more data around this stuff. These are like my gut feelings and based on conversations I've had for the past 6 to 8 out of the 8 weeks in the past. I can't talk right now. Out of the 6 weeks out of the 8, I've been on the road. Clearly, I need some help. So this is from like anecdotal data I've heard in person. So one is I think there will be an increase in micro events that will lead to more sellers are going to need to be a part of. So, for example, you have your reps spread out across the world, they're hybrid, whatever. But I think they'll be like, hey, we're going to have an East Coast micro event for customers. We're going to have a Midwest micro event for customers. We're going to have a West Coast event for micro events for customers. I think that will be a huge exponential increase for everyone moving forward. And that will be a new selling motion where we're not going to go to massive events every single other month. We're going to focus on
Right.
these micro ones. I think that's going to be big. Two is there's going to be a huge focus on LinkedIn more than ever. They have a billion users right now. More people are posting, more executives are getting active. So I think there will be actually more executives, part of like our mechanism, but more executives creating content. Those executives will be used as a go-to-market channel to reach out to other executives as they create content.
Yeah.
SDRs will still be in play, but they'll be working together to get results. I think that's going to be huge. And another thing on the selling and buying side is you're going to have to find ways, and everyone already knows this, we're seeing it. You're going to have to find ways to get to finance earlier. So one of the things I've been working on is when we close like influencer deals is I actually want to talk to the CFO if I can. or someone on the finance team to be like, how do you look at this? This is brand new. How are you seeing that this
Right.
even has ROI? And that may be like, well, Morgan talking to finance, like, yeah, I want to know. Like, these are the people that are going to give you the money. So I want to know like what's going on. I think the buying motion is going to change because like, yes, you had to think about the CFO before, but like you've had to think about it a lot more now. And so I'm trying to have as many conversations with CFOs, honestly, as possible to understand why do they invest into this.
I think all three are great takes, and like definitely coming down the pipeline, particularly on the third one. I really love it a lot because one of the biggest shifts that I notice with like junior sellers and like more mature professional sellers, if you will,
Yeah.
is like diving at risk head on versus avoiding it. And like I think finance falls squarely in that category of like everyone just thinks of finance where like deals go to die, right? Like let's get more buy-in before we go
Oh,
to finance. And you're kind of saying like F that in a way. Like you're almost saying like I want to do the opposite. Like I want to get in front of him ASAP. And you even had a couple questions that I really loved. Like, how are you drawing ROI numbers from this, right? Like
yeah.
getting them to tell you like what the explanation is. How has that kind of gone, and how have you seen shifts based on taking that kind of new approach towards finance?
Well, first and foremost, they're actually very open because no one ever asked these questions, right? It's very similar to like, y'all are gonna laugh at this because this is so, you're gonna think this is out of pocket, but it makes sense. So, Harry Potter, most people have probably seen the movies, and you're probably like, where's he going with this? So, when you watch the movies and they show potions class with Snape, it's like the imagery of that is like no one's ever trying to go to potions class,
Right.
right? But if you took the time to just like talk to Snape, he probably would give you some good insight. You're laughing, but you know it's true.
I love it.
He
I
helped
love it.
Harry out that one time when they were trying to figure out on how to block the Patrona curse or whatever. I think it was Cecil Patronus, whatever. It's like he learned a lot in that. How to block, how to like shield Voldemort out of his mind. I know y'all are like a lot of people are like, this is crazy, but if you watch the movie, it's pretty wild because Snape was the only person that was able to defend his thoughts from Voldemort the entire time.
You're not wrong.
That to me is why I think people miss that point. So why am I saying this? Because people see Snape as very intimidating and they're like, well, I don't want to talk to him. But like if I was in, as I have my Slytherin colors on today, if I was in Harry Potter, I would be talking to Snape a lot because I'm like, this dude has knowledge. So it's the same thing in finance. Most people see them as like Slytherin or a bad guy or like we got to figure out a way to get past them real quick. And I'm like, these people have the insights on how does the unique economics of the business work on why are they investing in influencer marketing and why is the CFO saying this is good and what are they correlated towards and how they look at spend. So the conversations so far, I've talked to a couple, have been really good, and it's helped us with our contracts, it's helped us with our terms, and it's helped us be better. And I think if you're gonna be good at this game, you need to understand the economics and the legal of how this works. That's where I spend a lot of my time.
That's really, really great. I mean, that's like tip of the spear front line. That's not even in the trenches. That's like tip of the spear. I'm a
Of
huge
the Snape example, I literally was like, oh, well, yeah, guys. But yeah.
Hey, I'm a huge analogies guy. So
Yeah.
I'm all for it. And I'm all for, like I said, diving headfirst at the
Right.
risk in a deal rather than like, oh, let's just save it till the end and, put months of time and then maybe by then they'll be over it. No, they're thinking about it too. So just
Yep.
get it over with.
Exactly.
We're winding down here, and I didn't prepare you for this pre-show. But what's kind of like, do you have like a hot take right now that maybe a lot of people aren't discussing? If you don't, we can move on to something else because I didn't prepare you for it. But I feel like you're a man of hot takes.
I do. I've said this before, but I'm gonna say this again because I don't think people hear me clearly. I'm gonna make a post on this, and I know people aren't gonna like it, but it is what it is. We need to change the way that we bring in creators and stop calling them strategic advisors. This just
Preach.
needs to stop. Now, some of you may be like, wait, Morgan, you have strategic advisor on your thing. I do, but notice how mine are very granular. So for Cognizant, I am a content and creative advisor, not just a random strategic advisor, which
Right.
me and Devin laugh at this because, like, if you're an advisor, you should be strategic. Like, why do we need strategic advisor? You should already be strategic as an advisor. Otherwise, you shouldn't be advising. Like, that's just real talk. So the thing is, right, is like, we need to stop doing this because you're diluting the real advisors that would come into your company. Now, we haven't done this yet, but in 2025, I'm going to look to get legitimate advisors on what we're building. Once we have continuously get our messaging clarity clients, I'm going to be like, yeah, we're going to get real advisors. But real advisors are not going to want to join strategic advisors that are really content creators that aren't on the same level as them. They're not going to want to be in the room. And you also dilute your brand when you come out with strategic advisors and they do one post to say they're a strategic advisor, and then they give no advice on the actual context of what your product does and the problems you solve. So that is my hot take. It needs to stop. Like I'm actually getting sick of it. I will make my post. People won't be happy and don't care. It just needs to stop.
I couldn't agree with you more. So they can come after me too.
Yeah.
Morgan, what do you want to leave the people with? Know you're working on a lot at AMP. Anything you want to
Yeah.
plug or last words that you want to leave with the listeners?
Last words, and this goes if you're a seller, but also if you're looking to do influencer marketing. If you're selling it internally or you want to do it yourself, go to your leaders and say, let's do an experiment.
Mm.
You have to think of as a scientist. So all scientists, I was terrible at science, but this is the one thing I learned is that you have to start off with an experiment or hypothesis in order for something to be true.
Yep.
So they didn't just say, you know what? Yeah, we got these planets out here and we have planets now. No, they were like, here's our hypothesis. We think something else is out there. Okay, we went out there, we found there are other planets. Okay, so now we got to figure out what that means. Okay, now that we know what that means, here's what it means, right? So experiment with influencer marketing, test it, and then see what works for you and go from there. And that's what our whole job is that we come in when people are ready for the experimentation phase and they're like, yep, we want to build our internal leaders as creators and we'll help you build those internal leaders as creators, as subject matter experts to then do a new channel for go to market to get new leads and business, etc. And that's what we even do with my own brand partnerships with like the HubSpots of the world, the people we work with, is that we say, hey, look, we're going to run an experiment, this pilot. We're going to see what works. We're going to double down what works. And then this is our long-term brand partnership. Same thing we do with Cognizant. So that's what I would say for everyone to focus on. And the sellers do the same thing. Experiment with new stuff. That tactic I gave you in the beginning, that legit was an experiment I did last week because I was like, let me see if it works. It works. So guess what I did? That's literally all I'm doing this week. Like I'm just running the same play because it works. And you can do the same.
It's not even just the testing. I think it's the questioning of assumptions. Like it all
Yeah.
has to start with questioning an assumption because everyone who's like ahead of the curve is always questioning something that other people aren't. So it's like
Yeah.
question the assumption, have a hypothesis, test it, right? And if you can keep that motion going, you're going to be in really good hands. A lot of
100%.
really good advice in this episode, Morgan. What do you want to plug with the audience before we jump?
Yeah. So if you want to, or you are a seller that's like, I'm struggling with outbound, I need to sell more, or you're a leader listening in, you're like, we need to get into the market. You need content combined with sales to be successful. It's not either or, it's a combination. So if you're looking for your internal leaders to grow and create content, you want to process, you want more outbound and you want some more inbound, hit us up at Amp Creative, hit me up on DMs and LinkedIn, and we can get you sorted.
Folks, go connect with Morgan on LinkedIn, Morgan J Ingram, AMP Creative. Follow them there as well. Morgan, this has been absolutely fantastic. Folks, if you enjoyed episode one in the new format, let me know in the comments. Definitely put a lot of thought and effort into this and always open to all of your constructive feedback. Morgan, thanks again for gracing episode number one. Sales Stories in Real Life, fam. See you next week. Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.